This is the NFL on NBC for Week 8 with host Greg Gumbel and co-host Ahmad Rashad.
Venerable Soldier Field in Chicago is the site as the 4-2 Chicago Bears host the Houston Oilers. Quarterback Eric Kramer having a terrific season for the Bears. 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions for the second highest scoring team in the NFC. Another of our early games is at Giant Stadium, where the Dolphins, looking to bounce back from 2 straight losses, face the miserable New York Jets. Once again, Bernie Kosar gets the start for the Dolphins. Last week he did fine, but it was the defense that betrayed Miami. In our big doubleheader game, the resurgent Denver Broncos face the team with the best record in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. Hi, everyone. Greg Gumbel along with the entire cast of characters. Joe Montana, Joe Gibbs, Mike Ditka, the same Mike Ditka who taught Jim Harbaugh everything he knows about quarterbacking.
And he's trying to forget it all, and if he does forget it all, they're going to win again today.
Now, did you ever remember anything that a coach ever taught you?
No, you just don't listen to him.
Listen and listen well, coaches. We begin with Mike Ditka and Jim Harbaugh's former team, the Chicago Bears, who host Houston today. The Bears are in the thick of the NFC Central race, tied with the Packers, 1/2 game behind the Bucs. Bob Trumpy has a report. Bob.
Greg, thank you. A couple of new faces on the offense for the Chicago Bears. First of all, the 1995 Heisman Trophy winner out of Colorado, Rashaan Salam, missed a couple of weeks at camp, so he came in and had a slow start. But if you talk to the Bears coaches, this young man is going to be their future. He's turned the ball over, put the ball on the ground a little bit. Walter Payton, his confidant here in Chicago, has told him, forget the fumbles, you'll be fine. The other big name is Eric Kramer. You mentioned his performance in '95, 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. He is a young man who sees the field very well. He spreads the ball around. And maybe most importantly, Greg, Eric Kramer can get the ball down the field to people like Curtis Conway. So this offense for Chicago now is a little more vertical, a little quicker to the end zone.
All right, Trump, thank you. Eric Kramer is the number 3 rated quarterback overall in the National Football League, Joe, number 2 in the NFC. What's the difference between the Eric Kramer this year and the one last year?
Well, number one, he hasn't lost his job yet, and he's still on the field. But the biggest thing is that I think he's playing with a lot more patience, a lot more poise. He's letting this offense work for himself, and he's not trying to make the big plays. He's got some great tools to work with Salam and Conrad, and he's letting them do the work and taking advantage of them.
All right, Mike, you talked with Dave Wanstedt this week. What's going on with these Bears?
Well, it is. It's probably the most explosive offense the Bears have had in a long time, but I think Dave's big concern is defense. They're not consistent on defense. They haven't stopped the run well. They haven't defended the pass well. The other thing is kicking. The kicking game is not real good, and Todd Sauerbrauer is a big problem. He's not punting the ball well, and he's not kicking off that well, and that's a big concern to that team.
All right, Mike, let's move to the Dolphins and the Jets, who meet today at the New Jersey Meadowlands. After starting 4-0, Miami has dropped its last 2 games. For the Jets, last week's loss to Carolina left them with the worst record in football at 1-6. Chris Collinsworth has more from Giant Stadium. Chris.
Greg, what appears to be an easy game for the Dolphins on paper certainly made more difficult because of some key injuries to the Miami Dolphins. Not only Dan Marino out of this one because of the injuries, Bernie Kosar gets a start. Also, Eric Green will be out, as will Trace Armstrong because of a knee injury. But good news for Miami Dolphin fans, Dan Marino, before the ball game, able to move around a little bit, doing his best to Ali shuffle, and he told me just moments ago that he would definitely be playing next week against the Buffalo Bills. As for the Jets, Bubby Brister makes his 2nd consecutive start, but don't be surprised if Glenn Foley works his way into this ball game before it's over as the rebuilding job continues for the Jets. Greg?
All right, Chris, thanks very much. One of our late games today, Indianapolis at Oakland. Jeff Hostetler will not play for the Raiders today. He took an elbow and a forearm to the throat last Monday night from Broncos linebacker Dave Wyman. There was no conclusive video of the incident since it occurred away from the ball. We have obtained this footage from the Raiders. Here is the end of the play when Wyman went after Hostetler. Wyman was ejected from the game and then fined $4,000. The Raiders felt that was much too light. They are pushing for a much heavier fine and/or suspension. The league is going to look into it, and the Raiders have sent Gene Washington of the league office a copy of the same footage that we just showed you. Joe, a quarterback's in a vulnerable situation when the play turns around and it comes back the other way.
One of the first things you learn as a quarterback early in your career is when something like this happens, a fumble, an interception, start looking around because people hunt up the quarterback because he's usually the last means of defense there. But here you can see he's way away from the play. The play's about to end, And this is absurd for someone to go in and take a cheap shot like this. He deserves more than $4,000.
Okay, Joe, this is not a typical play. This is a renegade play out of the blue.
I think it is, and I have never been around a coach in the NFL that taught a cheap shot like that. I don't think good teams are cheap shot artists, and I don't think good players are cheap shot artists. That's my experience.
All right, Joe just said that fine isn't enough. Would you do more?
Well, I agree with him. I think the fine is not enough. I think what you ought to do is suspend the guy for a game or two, and I think then he'll understand, because then you're fined a game salary. I think that's a lot more. But this is way out of hand. This is a bad thing. And then he taunted the guy once he knocked him down.
All right, gentlemen, for big doings at 4 o'clock kickoffs as well. For that, let's go over to Ahmad.
You know, Greg, you called the Jets miserable, and I just thought about that. Not only is that cold, but it's also true. Kansas City, on the other hand, and Denver on a roll. The Chiefs are 6-1, best in the AFC. Denver has won its last 2 games by a combined score of 64-3. The Broncos still trail the Chiefs in a very competitive AFC West by 2 games. Phil Simms has a report from Mile High Stadium.
Thanks, Ahmad. Yesterday out here in Denver, it was 75 and sunny. Well, today, right now, it's 36 degrees. And 1 hour west, look what's coming. Snow, and lots of it. 6 to 12 inches of snow forecast should be coming in here around game time. Look at the clouds rolling in all over now over the stadium. Wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. I think the players can deal with the snow today, but what's going to be a problem is those wind gusts for the quarterbacks and receivers. Saying that, I think the advantage goes to John Elway because of his arm strength. Elway, we can expect to see him again in that no-huddle, shotgun formation. Great success the last couple weeks. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. On the other hand, the Kansas City Chiefs, only 1 victory in their last 12 times here at Mile High Stadium. Then they were led by Joe Montana, who's sitting in that studio today. They know if a victory here today, they have a good shot at winning this AFC West title with victories over the Raiders and the Denver Broncos. Now let's throw it back to that warm, cozy studio, and I'm Ahmad Rashad.
All right, thanks, Phil. Kansas City at 6-1, not only playing well, but very confident.
It's definitely a different team. The confidence is stemming from one person, and that's Steve Bono. Everyone knew at this point that he could come in and play as a backup, but he's answered the questions about being a starter, playing in some critical situations, and coming down and winning some games at the end.
All right, Joe, how about Denver? Early in the season, a lot of people thought they were out of it. All of a sudden, they find themselves in a situation where they can get right back in it.
They can get back in it, Ahmad, but as you know, I love picking teams that are in desperate situations. Hey, they cannot afford to be set in 4-4, lose this game, and have Kansas City at 7-1. It's a desperate situation. I wouldn't pick against them today.
Now, everybody talks about John Elway and what he's done with that shotgun offense, but what about the defense?
Well, they've only given up 3 points in the last 2 weeks. You should win those 2 football games. And I don't think it's so much a difference in personnel. I think they're just playing a better scheme on defense, and the people know where they're supposed to be, and they're getting there.
The season really starts about now, doesn't it? It gets good. By the way, we have got the entire AFC West playing in our 4 o'clock games. Football's best division. The Raiders, with Vince Evans replacing Jeff Hostetler, host the red-hot Colts and Jim Harbaugh. And some of you will see San Diego visiting the Kingdome to take on the Seahawks. And speaking of Seattle, it's been a long time since anyone heard from the Boz.
What's up with this guy right here? This is a mother's worst nightmare.
Up next, former Seattle Seahawk Brian Bosworth checks in. We'll bring you his visit with Jim Gray when the NFL on NBC continues.
The NFL on NBC is brought to you by Charles Schwab and Company, helping investors help themselves. By Subway, now that's a sandwich. And by American Express.
Back in the late 1980s, Brian Bosworth was a famous football player. He signed a 10-year, $11 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks. But his career as a linebacker was cut short by a shoulder injury. Just 24 games played in 3 seasons. Now he's an actor, currently shooting a movie 4 hours north of Toronto, and that is where Jim Gray spoke to him.
When you look at yourself now, are you Brian Bosworth or are you still the Boz?
Well, I think I'm still both, you know, because I still, the Boz, I look at the Boz, and then, I never took the Boz seriously when I played the guy. And he was, just, now that I look at him, he's like the first character that I ever played, you know. And when I first started playing him, I didn't take him seriously, and I had a lot of fun with him. And now that I look back on him, I laugh at some of the things he did, because I just can't imagine my grandfather used to say, you know, don't let your mouth overload your ass. And that's what the Boz was all about. He was always constantly overloading his mouth. And it was fun. You know, I really enjoyed being that character.
What were some of the most outrageous things that you did as the Boz?
The ridiculous haircut that I had. So I look back when I go home and I see the pictures and I just laugh at this, you know, big meathead with this haircut and stripes, and I just shake my head at the phenomena that was happening at the time, because all the other kids were doing the same thing, you know, and I just, you know, I wanted to apologize to all the parents for causing their headaches for the haircut.
Do you feel as though you would have been a great professional football player, or was there more style really than substance?
No, I always thought that I was a classic overachiever. I didn't really have the body frame, you know, that a classic middle linebacker would have. I was fast as lightning. I still am. I think that's what really set me apart from most linebackers at the time. But I think my heart would have allowed me to finally achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve.
You said you didn't have the body, so you kind of created it. And that gets into the whole steroid issue and your use of steroids.
Sure.
When you look back upon that, what are your thoughts now? Big mistake?
Well, you know, it's funny. Back then, you know, steroids weren't as taboo as they are today. They weren't, you know, frowned upon. And, you know, it was 20 years old, 21 years old, and there's some things that I did when I was 20 and 21 years old that I wish I had not done. But if I hadn't done them, then I couldn't talk to young kids today about, you know, the ramifications of actually experimenting with these drugs and doing things that may cause you problems down the road.
People who might be watching this, you don't look like the Boz or the Brian Bosworth that we all know. Your hair has grown.
Yeah.
You're much smaller, noticeably smaller than you once were.
Yeah.
Do people still come up and recognize you on the street?
Oh, yeah, they do. I laugh at this. I mean, he's a fun guy, and I like the image that this guy had. And people still recognize and they identify with this guy here. This guy really took life. He set boundaries for himself, and I think he loved to jump over the line all the time just to see what it's like on the other side of the fence.
Mike, he was a guy, when he came out of college, he was one of the best self-promoters that I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, he billed himself as the next Dick Butkus.
Give me a break. Next Dick Butkus. He's about as close to Butkus as Snow White was. Now, this guy had some little 8.5 shoes, some little tiny hands, and he took 20 steps when he ran. If he couldn't run fast, he couldn't have played this game.
And obviously, he would not have been able to play for you.
Not at all.
All right. Coming up, we'll talk about the state of officiating in the NFL.
Penalty against the offense. We were taking the ball, and it took more time than it should have.
What does that mean?
Here's our doubleheader lineup coming up on NBC today. Most of you will see the Oilers and the Bears early, the Chiefs and the Broncos late. Let us turn our attention to NFL officiating. Several bad calls last Monday night reminded many NFL observers that it hasn't been a great season for the officials, and many of the complaints have come from the players.
Must have brought these referees from Kmart. We don't see. I can't. What the? Who's watching over there? That was a touchdown. Damn it, Scott! Please hold on.
All right, come on, really good.
Well, I don't know if it can get worse than it was last year, but it's pretty bad.
Comes a time where you have to say enough is enough, and it's time to get trying to get some new blood in there and maybe some better vision.
They make basically the final decision on what the outcome of the game is.
We work so hard as players to win week in and week out, and you hate to see a game lost or won on a bad call.
The sideline call, they blew it. I was right there. Guy's foot hit on the line, out of bounds.
It's human error, just like the coaches make mistakes, the ball players make mistakes, the officials are human, and they're going to make mistakes.
Officials are conferring to see if he had possession. Big call right here. Touchdown. Oh, it's a touchdown. They blew it. Oh, that's a bad call.
Today was a debacle. For officials to sit there and not be able to count 11 people, it's embarrassment to the National Football League.
I've not been an advocate of instant replay, but I've been persuaded over the last couple of weeks.
I'm definitely a fan of instant replay.
I think we need instant replay.
I think that instant replay needs to be brought back unless they're going to clean up the act.
You're not going to get the officials to work a perfect ball game.
If you have modern technology that can correct an obvious error, we should have the ability to use that.
He had both knees. His knees are down.
That's a major miss by the official.
What, they got to rip my head off before you call it? But he got, blocked out. And I said, what about the umpire that was staring right at me?
Why don't you give me a whistle? Let me call a few of them, babe. I think they need to give those guys a full-time job because officiating is really gotten progressively worse each year.
That's a horrible call. That is absolutely a horrible call. Should have been a touchdown for the Patriots.
What would the league office say? You're full-time. And then if I was official, I'd say, well, how can I be fired as an official? Well, if you make 3 mistakes a year or 4 mistakes, you're fired. I said, I don't want your job.
Another growing concern, despite a supposed emphasis on player safety, officials did not call penalties on hits, which later resulted in $12,000 fines.
What can we do to enhance or limit the number of mistakes made by officiating?
Anybody out there in TV land knows where we can get some decent refs?
Before we get the opinions of our resident experts, let's bring up instant replay. Back in 1992, it was turned down by a league vote. 21 votes were needed, only 17 were in favor. Let's go to Will McDonough, who's been talking with team officials about the possibility of instant replay returning.
Hey, Greg, thanks very much. Let's go to the board and look at our new poll for NBC on instant replay and see what we find. Look at the line in the middle and take those teams above the line, and I call that the cement division. These are the teams that say, no way we're going to change our mind. We'd like the system the way it is. Below the line, I call that the leaner division. Teams that say, no, but our minds could be changed. Guys like Marty Schottenheimer in Kansas City and Chuck Schmidt in Detroit.
I would vote against it because while I was originally an advocate of it, and I think in principle it makes sense, the reality of it is that it didn't work.
We think there's a lot of inefficiencies in it, inequities in it. And if it comes up again under the same format, we would vote against it.
There, Greg, you have an idea of what their objections are. Talking to all of those teams, they say our system should be faster, more efficient, have better technology. I don't see that happening unless, of course, that great panel you have with you there today can change a lot of minds.
All right, Will, thanks. We are all in agreement that it needs fixing. Joe Gibbs, the question is, what do you do?
Well, let's start with what we all do agree upon, and that is that officials are human. They make mistakes. Their mistakes can cost a coach or can cost a player an entire year or sometimes his career. Okay, how do we help them? Okay, we can help them by starting to add 1 full-time official a year until everybody's full-time. And yes, you can get fired if you make enough mistakes. That's part of life. We all can get fired. Certainly Mike. Yep. Mike can't, I can. Yeah. Okay, and I would say that the other thing that you need to add is instant replay. It's crazy not to use every tool we can to help officials who do make mistakes.
Let's get a player's perspective. It has to be real frustrating, Joe, to be out there working all day long only to have a game go another way on a bad call.
Well, it's obvious the players are very frustrated. You go out there, you're busting your rear end for 60 minutes, and it comes down to someone who's not really involved in the game making the final outcome of it, or determining that. And here you go. You do have the capability of correcting it. You've got 4 more, 5 more, 6 more sets of eyes, how many ever cameras you got out there. If the people on television can do it right away, what's taking the officials so long in the booth? You can't figure that out.
And Mike, you bring up maybe the most important aspect of all.
Well, we always talk about what's best for the league. What's best for the league is what the fans want. The fans want instant replay. Believe me, let's bring it back.
All right, gentlemen. Will McDonough always has his usual weekly news and notes. Let's check back in with him. Will.
Well, Greg, like it's been all year, almost all the good stuff is happening in Dallas. For example, the league office yesterday notified Jerry Jones that, in their opinion, his team is almost $1.4 million over the cap. And you can't play a game in this league with your team over the cap. At the same time, the league has sent a message to Judge David Doty in Minnesota saying, we'd like a hearing right away on this matter. If Jerry Jones is upheld in a hearing, nothing changes. But if Jerry Jones loses, that means he has to find a way to get rid of that $1.4 million, and this might cost the Cowboys some football players before their next game in Atlanta. Let's keep it in Dallas. Michael Irvin has been fined $4,000 by the league for a head slap in the game against San Diego. He'd been warned about this for a previous incident against Minnesota earlier in the year, and the second time around, they hit him with the fine. And I talked to Barry Switzer on Friday, and he said Deion Sanders worked all week on offense. He and Ernie Zampese, the offensive coordinator, have put in an offensive package of pass plays for Deion. He won't be in the pass offense against Atlanta next week, but he will after that. Greg?
All right, Will, thanks very much. We're back to wrap things up right after this. Right to the picks now. Will McDonough and Joe Gibbs both like the Packers over the Vikings. Good luck, Joe. Mike Ditka is taking Denver over Kansas City. Joe Montana picks the Lions over the Skins. I'm taking New Orleans over Carolina. Ahmad gives the nod to Buffalo over New England tomorrow night. And speaking of the Bills, all of us here at NBC wish Marv Levy all the very best for a speedy recovery. He had surgery for prostate cancer this week. We're happy to say earlier today he was released from the hospital. We wish one of the great people in the game of football all the very best. We'll see you at halftime with scores and highlights. The NFL on NBC continues after these words from your local station.